over the last year. Thanks again, guys.
Absolutely gorgeous to see everyone here. Can you all hear me just fine? Excellent. Very, very good news. And welcome back, Gabriel Shipton, to Bitcoin Alive. It's gorgeous to have you here again. A year later, a lot has happened.
Yeah, it's great to be back. It's, now that Julian's free. Last time I was on this stage, my brother was in prison in the United Kingdom. And now he's not. He's free. He's back home in Australia. It's... very different circumstances.
It's been, absolutely. It's been a crazy year. It's been absolute madness for you for what, 10 years you've been lobbying?
Well, from 2019, I've been working on Julian stuff, since he went into the prison.
Right, but before that, he was holed up in the embassy. So were you all sort of on board trying to help him out of that situation even back then? No, I wasn't personally. I think, during all those years back when he was in the embassy, I'd go and visit him many times whenever I was in London, but he had his own voice then. And he could fight for himself. Even though he was in these difficult circumstances, he could still operate WikiLeaks and still had quite a bit of his own agency. But when it was in 2019 when he went inside the prison, and I went to see him in the prison with my dad and journalist John Pilger, who passed away at the end of last year. And I'd never seen him like that ever before. Even when he was under intense pressure, when they were publishing CIA leaks, the Vault 7 leaks, or any other time, I'd never seen him in a state like that. And that's when I said, if I don't do something, I might never see him again. And that's when I started campaigning for his freedom. I think you told us last year that he was like in 23 hours of solitary isolation during that time, wasn't he, every day?
Yes, solitary confinement in the health wing of the prison, which is, the prisoners actually called that the hell wing. And so, it was very, very bad conditions that he was in. And, it was just, sort of very overwhelming to see him like that. Someone who as my older brother, I'd looked up to all my life, and who was such a pillar of strength. When he was publishing and working with WikiLeaks, to see him in that state, it was very distressing. So
tell me about. Not many people have been through what Julian's been through. Before we get started on some of the more kind of meaty and political stuff. How's he adjusting? Very few people have been through what he's been through. That's a PTSD experience. How do you reintegrate? How's he doing?
Yeah, he's doing really well. He's every day he's engaging more and more with the world. He's getting so much better. I went and saw him just when he got out, and actually just spent some time with him last month, and he's just. He's getting so much better now. He's very interested, obviously, in AI, like I think everybody is, and re-engaging with what's going on in the world. I think we'll hear from him pretty soon about what he's going to be up to next. So I don't want to sort of spoil anything for him at this stage. But he's out in nature as well, and showing his kids. He's got a 5 and a 7-year-old sons, my nephews, and he's showing them all the Australian wildlife. The other day he sent me a photo of he picked up a snake on the side of the road, just went and grabbed this python, and I'm like, okay, so he's enjoying himself.
Okay, and you're not going to, just amongst friends here, of course, you're not going to give away a little bit about where he's going or what he's about to do next? We won't tell anyone, we promise.
I don't want to steal Julian's thunder. I'll leave that to him. I'll leave that to him when he's ready to come out. But very interested in AI and what's going on, and that sort of how we're consuming information now through these AI models, and how it's just another form of control of the information that we're getting.
Right, okay. So it's been a big year, obviously, for Julian coming out and resettling back into the world. It's been a big year on the world stage. In the meanwhile, we've got a new administration in the US, obviously. You could argue that independent media is somewhat responsible for the Trump administration coming into power. We had Elon Musk buying X and opening that up for more freedom of speech. We had Joe Rogan platforming half the Trump administration. And at the same time, we're seeing independent media being introduced into the White House briefings. We're seeing independent media being used to ostensibly or allegedly release the Epstein files and the JFK files at some stage. That's going to be done through independent media. It feels like WikiLeaks was way ahead of its time, that independent media is really finding its place in the world now. You're part of that. You're a documentary maker. What's your take on independent media, A, in the world, and B, in Australia, because it feels like we're lagging?
Yeah, well, you say that, I guess, they're calling Trump the podcast president, right? And because he did all these podcasts. But I think, if you look back to 2016, during the 2016 election, that was the first time that that filter of corporate media was taken away, and that WikiLeaks was able to publish the Podesta emails, the Clinton emails, and to great effect. That showed this corruption within the Democratic Party, that Hillary Clinton essentially rigged the primary against Bernie Sanders, and WikiLeaks exposed all that information. And then you look at the 2019 election, where Julian was taken off the scene. You had all these takedown requests to social media, that sort of closing up again of the media landscape. And now it's reopened once again, with Elon Musk taking over Twitter, the Twitter files, all that being exposed. So I think, as you said, WikiLeaks was, before Elon Musk was championing free speech, WikiLeaks was there on the scene for many, many years before that. And they don't, WikiLeaks never charged you for a blue tick or anything. It was always free. It was always free to use, based on, it was never a commercial model like things like X is now. So there wasn't this sort of techno-feudal where you sort of serve at the... I think it's a big problem with things like X. Like, you as a user or a content creator, you're giving all your information, you're giving all your work to these platforms, and they can deplatform you like that. They can also increase taxes on you, like charge you for these registration fees or blue check marks. So it's sort of these feudal overlords are sort of lording over all your IP and all that content you provide. And I think that's what's really interesting about things like Nostr, these protocol-based social media. And I think that's really where I think things will go in terms of developer interest, because people don't want to contribute to these closed platforms, that developers would rather contribute to an open platform where they get to keep their work. So I think that's a really interesting space, and Julian's very much interested in Nostr as well as a platform.
Absolutely. We did a great panel on Nostr at a previous conference here. So, okay. So let's just deep dive into free speech then. It feels like different parts of the world are going in different directions with this, or it just feels like it's in a state of flux. It feels like there's... people are really onto this free speech thing. Again, Julian was ahead of his time. He was fighting for free speech back in the day that any of us realised we had to fight for it. We thought we had it, right? And it's really only probably since COVID that many of us have woken up to the way in which it was censored, it was shut down, that any alternative voices were deplatformed. And so I think the world, or much of the world, seems to be waking up to that. And yet, and it feels like maybe America is moving towards, let's have more of that, let's have more transparency. We were just talking about the Twitter files backstage, and Matt Taibbi, how do I say his name?
Taibbi.
Taibbi, yeah. Thank you very much. And so So my question, and yet it feels like the moment the Trump administration came in, UK, Europe and Australia went double down. Like, we can't be having that stuff going on in our countries. We need to go harder with our censorship, harder with our hate speech laws, harder with our under 16 bill, you know, that's going to do facial recognition to get on YouTube or whatever it's going to be. So, it just seems so complex, and sometimes it feels a bit hopeless, and sometimes I look at, dare I say, America. I never would have thought I would say these words, but I'm feeling like it's the hope in the world at the moment. How do you and how does Julian see free speech right now, and, you know, and how do we find some hope in Australia?
Yeah, well, to frame it more broadly, we've seen what's happened in the US election. We've seen independent media playing a huge role in the election of Donald Trump. And, you look back to his first election, when in 2016, when WikiLeaks played a role in exposing the Democratic Party. And I think we look at Europe and then Australia, and the governments here are very scared of an open information landscape. They're very scared of populism and populist policies, and so that's why you're seeing this closing down, because they want to be able to fight back against these populist leaders, against these populist policies, and so you're seeing a closing of the information landscape. But luckily we have the internet, which is borderless, and we can share information on the internet on platforms like X or other forums or platforms. So they're looking at ways of how can we stop what's happened in the United States, with this populist movement. How can we stop that from happening in our countries? And that's why you're seeing this closing down of different levels of speech, particularly, I guess on the internet, on platforms like X and Facebook and things like that. I think interestingly, they tried this disinformation bill right in Australia that just totally fell flat. But what they were able to get through was another leverage point, which was the banning of social media for the minors, and that bill. And I sort of saw that in this global attack on these internet platforms, that, okay, we can't get the disinformation bill through, but what we can do is we can go after a significant user base of these social media platforms by changing these minor laws, so that our governments now have a point of leverage on these social media platforms. So I think they're still looking for ways of how they can claw back some of the airtime from these social media platforms and feed us back into that corporate media system. But independent journalism, I won't be stopped. There's more and more podcasters out there like yourself. There's more and more independent journalists, Michael West Media, Declassified Australia, who are all doing amazing work. John Menadue has a very, very, very good blog that talks a lot about foreign policy. So the information is out there. I think what's also concerning now is you see people like Mary Kostakidis, who's been persecuted for doing a retweet of some Hezbollah statements, and those sorts of crackdowns, I think, are just as concerning as any others, and that sort of speech needs to be protected as well.
Okay, so let's just get into this for a moment, because we've got a little bit of breathing space to do so. Where should the line be? Is there a line with freedom of speech? Is there a point at which, we've got laws there about inciting violence. Is that the line? Where is the line with hate speech?
Yeah, I think the rule, I think the Supreme Court rule in the United States is imminent violence. Right. So if you're inciting imminent violence, then then they can shut you down. But otherwise, I think I'm I guess on the extreme end, and I'm I guess a free speech maximalist in that sense, and I think some I don't agree with all the views that are out there, but they need to be aired. They need to be aired. They need to be combated with good speech as well. And so I don't think the idea is like, okay, some speech offends us, or we find it offends our sensibility, or they're attacking our race or something like that. I think we've got to combat that with better speech and more speech rather than less.
So they've actually brought these two bills in, the under 16 and the hate speech laws. So is there any way, I don't know legally, other than a different party coming in and unwinding it, which isn't going to happen because in Australia the Liberal Party supported both of those pieces of legislation. So short of a minor party like the Libertarian Party, which of course everybody here is going to join after this conference, so short of that happening, is there any legislative recourse of, like what happened? How come a population doesn't get a say on something like that? We had 60,000 people, they rammed it through at 11 o'clock at night. 60,000 people were watching it live across Australia going, we don't want this bill. And they can just ram it through. They can do whatever they like once they're empowered, to be honest, including a whole lot of censorship. So I keep searching for hope. So is there anything that can be done on scale by the population against laws that we feel are unjust or unfair, other than just try and vote them out and hope the other side will do something different?
Well, I guess we can look back at our experience with Julian and how we advocated for him, and I think it's those personal stories that really can make a difference, and that if we support those people who are being persecuted for exercising their freedom of speech, I think defending them is the key to unwinding these laws, to showing that we're actually persecuting people for saying truthful information. I think that's a really good way to engage the public, and that really worked in our campaign for Julian. So even though we have these laws on the books, when they're used against people, we have to stand up and protect those people, with everything we have. And I've actually we haven't launched yet, but I've founded a charity that is going to do exactly that here in Australia, the Information Rights Project. So we'll be launching that charity, and ideally the idea of that was to have an entity that houses everything that we learnt in the fight for Julian, all the political connections we made, and leverage all those to protect other people who are being persecuted for exercising their freedom of speech. And it'll be DGR registered and all these sorts of things, so we can take donations and really keep that work going, protecting people who are finding it tough or saying the truth.
Okay, that's absolutely fantastic, and there's quite a lot of organisations out there doing all kinds of work in the freedom of speech space at the moment. I want to quote you your own tweet, your own post from the other day. This is more about not only was Julian at the forefront of freedom of speech fighting and independent media, but of course he was, I don't know if we want to say at the forefront, but was one of the people, certainly the most significant person that we've all seen be persecuted by a seemingly corrupt justice system. So I want to talk about the politicisation of justice, and yet we're seeing some good hope here. And your quote was this: "Key figures in Julian's persecution are being demoted by Trump. Revoked clearances of officials tied to the Russia investigation, ended security details for Mike Pompeo, yeehaw, and Senator Menendez imprisoned." It feels like this thing is massive. We're seeing activist judges blocking Trump, kind of being able to put forward his policy and his legislations that have been mandated by the public. Are we going to see an unwinding of that? And I've got a follow-up question about if we know the state of that in Australia versus America, but let's just talk about America first.
Yeah, I think, it's been it's absolutely some of the things that are happening under the Trump administration. I don't think we'd ever thought were possible, particularly this the USA winding back of the USAID and its sort of global influence network. It's been a savage tool of the CIA for many, many years, and involved in rolling governments all around the world. And I don't think I never believed that it would be dismantled like it is being dismantled right now. So some pretty incredible things are happening, and then the revoking of the security clearances, which people like Andrew Weissman, who was one of the leaders in the Russiagate hoax, revoking of those security clearances, I think is a huge message to anybody within the intelligence community in the United States, because it is their pathway. This is their career planning, right? Like, they join these agencies, they get their security clearance, and they work in these agencies, make enough connections, and then go into the private sector. And if they don't have that security clearance, that's their paycheck is totally gone. They're no longer able to get another job once they leave government. So it's a massive message to anybody in the intelligence community. Fuck around and find out, basically. And so you've got, I can't imagine what it'd be like to be in Washington at the moment, but you'd have a lot of people on tenterhooks. I think, I want to go over and see what it's like, but you'd have a lot of people looking over their shoulders within this intelligence community on notice about if they're still going to have a job or be able to have an income into the future. So I think those are really impactful decisions by the Trump administration, and they all feed in to hopefully Julian getting a pardon from the Trump administration, because these are the same people who persecuted Julian, the people that Trump is now demoting and withdrawing their security clearances or security detail in Mike Pompeo's case. These are all the people that went after Julian, that pursued Julian. Mike Pompeo, in 2017, when he became CIA director, declared a fatwa on WikiLeaks, said he was going to make it his personal mission to pursue Julian and destroy WikiLeaks because he was absolutely embarrassed by the Vault 7 leaks. And now he is, on the political trash heap. So I think that's a really good sign that something might happen for Julian in terms of a pardon, because at the moment he's free, but he's totally muzzled by this plea deal that he had to do. Because if he reoffends in any way, then all bets are off, and the 175-year sentence is potentially back on the table for him. So to really open up the opportunities and possibilities for Julian in the future, pardon would be hugely consequential for him in what he can do in the future.
So where is that at? Like where's it at are you fighting for it in the courts? Stella, of course, his wife is a human rights lawyer. So,
we've got some really good, over the years we've established some really good friends in Washington, people who are now very high in the Trump administration, like Tulsi Gabbard, who's now the Director of National Intelligence. She was very vocal about advocating for Julian when she was in Congress, and really helped me a lot when I was lobbying in the United States for Julian. Robert Kennedy Jr., who's now Health Secretary or something. Anyway, I forget what his position is, but he's very high up in the Trump administration. And he, as his policy platform when he was running for president, actually said he would pardon Julian on day one. So we've, and Tucker Carlson as well has been advocating for Julian for years and years, and actually went to see Julian when he was in prison. So I think we're very, very well positioned with people who really care about press freedom and care about Julian in the Trump orbit. So working those levers to get Julian a pardon, we're working on that, and hopefully something comes to fruition there.
That sounds really positive. You've got, all the right people in place. Okay, so let's tie this in a little bit to Bitcoin. We've just seen Bitcoin obviously go on the strategic Reserve. James Check has just been talking about how the institutional adoption, we've obviously got a couple of nation states, but that hasn't changed for quite a while. How do you see this playing out? Have you been staying abreast of the adoption of Bitcoin across the world? And do you see Bitcoin being on the strategic reserve as being a positive for freedom around the world? Ultimately, Bitcoin is freedom money, but is state-owned Bitcoin net positive or negative when it comes to Bitcoin as a tool for freedom?
Yeah, I think, I've been advocating with the Bitcoin community for a very long time. You're speaking at conferences all around the world, and whenever I spoke at those conferences, we're always trying to get Bitcoiners to do more politically. And what I think we've seen in this last US election and is the really coming of age of Bitcoiners as a political force. And they've been able to, form as a political movement and use that strength to advocate them for themselves very, very successfully. So you've got things like Bitcoin Reserve, but also things like the freeing of Ross Ulbricht. That was the Bitcoin community who advocated and the libertarian community, of course, but that advocated very, very strongly for that. And that's just proof now that how strong the Bitcoin community are and how politically mobile they are, that they can now achieve these sorts of things. So I think there's this incredible coming of age of Bitcoiners being able to achieve these political ends, and I think we'll see something similar in Australia. I think as the election approaches, people are going to be looking at the United States and seeing the effect that Bitcoin has had on that election, and I think there'll be some political hay to be made here in that sense as well. So, and it is a net positive for freedom, because you've got these freedom-minded people who are now directly in positions of influence. And so, I'd love to see more of that here in Australia, and I think of friends of, listening to Libertarian Party here, I'd be happy to work with them in their advocacy. We advocated in Parliament very strongly for Julian, and, I've spoken to people like Barnaby Joyce about Bitcoin. I remember him asking me, will there really only ever be 21 million? And I'm like, yes, Barnaby, there can't be more than that. And so that, like, getting Bitcoin on these people's radar and having a Friends of Bitcoin group in the Parliament, I think, it's time here in Australia for that sort of thing to happen.
Fantastic. This is getting into a bigger freedom question. Are we seeing tectonic shifts in the political landscape that sees America and whatever allies that it has on one side, and are we about to see Europe realigning with China and becoming more communist? And where would Australia go in that?
That's a pretty big question. I think more generally what we're seeing in the United States is this sort of return to like a realist foreign policy. The sort of liberal global sort of liberalism, like the idea that we're going to, or that the United States or us as a sort of ally of the United States, that we're going to go and impose democracy on countries overseas. I think we will see that dying off now, and this more realist approach coming to the foreground. And I think, in terms of Australia, I think we're incredibly positioned to take advantage of that realist and the multipolar world, actually. So that's another aspect of it, is the world is turning into a multipolar world. The US is no longer, you've seen Marco Rubio come out and say, okay, we're no longer going to be aiming to be a hegemon. We're going to recognise that there's multipolarity, that there are these hemispheres of control in the world. There's the US hemisphere, the sort of Asian hemisphere, and the European hemisphere, and each of these hemispheres will have their own sort of dominant power. And I think Australia has an incredible position there. We've got an east coast that faces the United States and Asia, and similarly with the west coast that faces to India. We're abundantly resource rich. We're very hard to, I guess we'd be very hard to invade. We're a vast country that would be very hard to invade. So I think we're sort of critically placed to be able to take advantage of this multipolarity. And I would encourage, my thoughts are that Australia has to begin acting in its own interest more and more, rather than tying ourselves to one ally, to really act in our own interest and work well in this sort of multipolar world that we see coming about. So Tucker Carlson, who was here last year, he did an incredible speech in Canberra, and he was saying just that. He says, you can't rely on the United States as an ally. This is coming from Tucker Carlson, not me. That we shouldn't rely on the United States as an ally, and we should act in our own interests as a sovereign nation. And I think we are uniquely positioned to do so in this new multipolar world.
Beautiful. Okay, absolutely fascinating to hear. We've got a few extra minutes up our sleeve. I feel like I've asked everything that I want to ask of you. Would you be okay if we ask for questions from the audience? Because I'm sure people want to ask
certainly.
you stuff.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay, fantastic. Kieran is in. You go.
So you alluded to yourself and your brother sort of looking into Nostr and what that sort of looks like for the future. Can you speak a bit more about that and sort of what Julian's thinking about specific to the protocol?
Well, when I've spoken to him about it, he looks at it more general, as a general, creating a platform or a protocol that attracts developers, like people to work on the protocol. And as I was talking about these other platforms earlier, like X or Facebook or these other social media platforms, developers or people put in all their work in there, but it can all be taken from you in any moment by these. By Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, by a flick of a switch, they can just basically take everything, all the work that you've put in there. So I think what Nostr has that is totally different is that it's a reliable space for developers, content makers to put in their work and to know that it can't ever be taken from them and that they will own it forever. And so building, I think, at the moment, Nostr's very much, it doesn't have a huge, broad appeal, but I think that's good in a way. It's the early adopters, it's the smart people who are on there, particularly a lot of Bitcoiners. And so I think that's good for a sort of nascent technology to have those smart people concentrated on that platform. But yeah, creating that zone, that sort of sweet spot where people can have proper freedom to develop the tools that they want on a protocol. I think that's where I've been talking to Julian about it more and more.
Anyone else? I'll ask a question then while we're waiting. You mentioned that from the advocacy for Julian has resulted in a kind of like a system or a movement now that can potentially advocate on behalf of others that have suffered from repressions against free speech. And of course, to the very much many people in the Bitcoin community, you kind of had that triumvirate of Ross Ulbricht, Julian Assange, and Edward Snowden. And of course, we've gotten a great response, relatively good result, certainly a fantastic result as far as Ross Ulbricht is concerned, a somewhat almost their result as far as Julian is concerned. Obviously, he's still under very much now, has to maintain an extremely low profile so as not to be at risk of ever having serving that hideous sentence. Anything that might potentially be on the horizon for allowing Edward Snowden to potentially ever once resume a normal life and not have to live in exile in Russia?
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of with the advocacy that we're doing for Julian in the United States. Often Julian and Snowden get paired together for a pardon, and I think with the advocacy that we're doing, often find a lot of there's still a lot of pushback from people in the military or different intelligence community figures about a pardon for Edward Snowden, or even dropping the investigation or charges against him. So it's a bit of I think a heavier lift for the advocacy for people in the United States for Edward Snowden. Not that it shouldn't happen, but he's got a couple of kids now, and he's living his life in Russia, and he has relative freedom. I don't know if he'd travel back to the United States now, but I imagine he would want to, if he could get a pardon or some guarantee that. He even said he would go back there if he could, because he's charged under the Espionage Act. The Espionage Act doesn't allow for a public interest defence, and so he can't actually argue in court that what he did exposed government criminality, which it did, and has found to, it's been found in a court that what he did exposed criminality within the NSA. He's actually said, I would come back and fight in the court if I was allowed to argue that what the information that I leaked was of the benefit to the public. And so he's not actually, even if it's sort of even less than a pardon that he's asking for. I mean, a pardon would be great, but if he was just allowed to have a proper court hearing where he was allowed to argue his case properly, I think he would win in a court. So, but I'm not sure that will happen, the climate in the United States.
Well, on that note, Gabriel, it's been an absolute delight to have you here. Please wrap up, it says. So thank you ever so much for coming to join us. Keep up the good work. Keep up the good fight. Where can we follow you on your socials?
I'm just Gabriel Shipton on X. So pop on there and follow me and stay up to date with what's going on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.